Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about some of the changes coming up in Wish version 3.801, specifically the changes to do with the Wish PMP service, which more and more of you are subscribing to. We've tried to introduce some features in this build that will make it easier for you to set up clients who do not wish to have the secure website portal, and also the ability to do multiple lines now. And we'll just jump right in. So what I'm going to start is I'm going to show you how we've created it to set up for multiple lines, which some of you have been asking for. So up here under admin functions, if I go into admin functions and down here to Wish PMP setup, you'll see that traditionally we had a single line that you could set up. Additionally, now in Wish version 3.8.01, you can set up up to 2 additional lines and subscribe to them separately. They each have a separate agency code in here, which you will see. And you'll see on some screens that we migrate to through this demonstration how those show up on the screen. Basically, the main one is line 1, and then this would be line 2. And if you set up for a third, it would be line 3 setup. So that dovetails with the way that you set up a client now. So let's talk about that. If I now go into where you set up your clients, which is in here, you have this additional area which you didn't have before, and that's up on top. So basically, there's a couple things. So in my demonstration that I've set up and shown you here, we have 2 different text messaging numbers that they can access. And you'll see that the label here, which says shelter text messages and outreach messages, that comes from back in this section where I set it up. So I called this one my shelter text message, my second one I called outreach. So that is on this screen. So basically, if you have a client who is a high-risk client and you want them, or they want to use the web portal, which is secure, you may recall from your knowledge of the Wish PMP so far, the web portal section does not need them to have text messaging on their phone. They don't even need a phone. They can log in and do their messaging through a website portal. And there's also a handy way for them to journal events in their life there as well, which is totally private and just for them. But basically, one of your lines, if they choose to do that, need to be the one that they can message you from the secure PMP website. And you indicate up here, so if I want her to contact us through the shelter text, and those are the messages that's available to your client through the secure website, I select that. Alternatively, if you have a second number, you would select that if that's the one that you wanted them to use through the website. If you do have multiple lines, only one they can actually access through the website. All the rest would have to come in through a text number, which you might provide down in this field here. So that deals with the multiple lines. One of the interesting additions into this build, Wish 3.8.01, is maybe you have a client who doesn't really want to do anything through the secure portal on the website and just wants to text you back and forth with their cell phone, like normal text messaging. Obviously, a high-risk client, you probably want to discourage that. But in those cases, what you can do is you can say, it's way simpler. You just select text messaging only, and then down in this area here, you would put their cell phone number. So if that was their cell phone number, you would type that in. What you'll notice is it's grayed out the website portal, and in fact, they do not need an email address to use this. They do not need to go to the secure website and set them up as a subscriber to that website. So it's much quicker for you to do this for clients who just want to do text messaging. And again, if it is a high-risk client, you probably want to give them access through the secure website portal. A little bit more setup for you, but it will be more beneficial to the client in the long run. Anyway, those are the changes on the client setup that deals with that. So What I'm going to talk about now is how that presents on the screen. So if I go in and I want to look at my unread messages, you'll notice I've got two lines set up. I've got a shelter text message and an outreach. So the shelter text message is line 1, the outreach is line 2. And basically I can see in here the little legend, so you can see I've got which calls came in on my second line and which calls came in on my first line. In brackets here, it shows you how many unread messages you have on each of those lines. And you can filter back and forth through here and see different things. So if I want to see all the messages that I got coming in December, for example, I could pick that. And here's all the messages that I had coming in the various lines in that time period. So that is one of the big things in 3.8.01 is you have the ability to have multiple lines. One of the other changes that we made in this build is the way we mask numbers. So you might notice down here, this one on the very bottom is from an unknown person. We don't have this person listed as a client. They came in on line 2, so the number is masked out. I can see the first 3 characters and the last 2 characters of the phone number, but the rest are represented by asterisks. With this build, you can actually control how you want masking to react. And you'll notice down here, if I select it, I have a button over here that becomes available to me called Unmask. And if I click that, in this case, it's asking for supervisor password. So if I put in the supervisor password here and click OK, it tells me what number that is. You can set up how that reacts actually, and the settings for the masking are also back here on the admin functions and wish PMP setup. So that is controlled on this very first tab, the general tab, and you select here. So you select between one of 4 choices. So currently in my demo, I have it number is masked, but the supervisor password can unmask it. Your other choices are, if you choose A, that is the number is masked, but if you're logged in as the administrator, you'll just be able to see the number on the screen. So for example, to show you how that would look, you see now I'm logged in as admin, I changed my setting, and even over here, it is not masked. But if I was not logged in as administrator, that would be masked out. The other choices back on that screen here are N, which means the number is masked and nobody can unmask it, not the administrator, not the supervisor. And the last one would be never mask the number, always show it to my workers, so all your workers will be able to see the number all of the time. So those are the choices that you have in there, and that deals with phone masking. So while we're back here on this setup screen, another small change we made was to the auto response setup. This used to be a maximum of 100 characters for each of the initial conversation and end of conversation messages. We have increased that to be up to 600 characters. But there is a caveat. So anything that's generally over about 150 characters may incur more usage fees. So that's why we put the character count up here. So this first one is 26 messages. You'll see if I type this long enough, and it will go up to 600 characters. But once it gets over 150, the color of that changes. Just kind of as an indication that message will probably cost you more money to send if it's going out to a cell phone. In the document for the PMP, there's a link that helps you discern how usage fees are calculated for text messages. But that was the size of the auto field that we created. So basically, those are the big changes. The other thing that we did in here has to deal with users. So as your administrator sets up your users, now you can identify if they have access to your PMP line. So you might notice here under Marg Knight on the second row, we don't want Marg to access any text messages come in on her main line, but she's allowed to access on the second line. And the standard or default response is staff can respond to any PMP service that you have set up. So more than likely you're going to have all these ticked, but you could untick one if you didn't want them to say to answer the text messages coming in on your second line or something like that. Lastly with that, if you have a restricted user, so for example, Jill is set up as a restricted user. I know not too many agencies are using restricted users, but if you are, you can now also indicate if you want that restricted user to be able to reply to text messaging or not in here, just like that. Anyway, those are the changes that have been made for Wish version 3.8.01, being released a little bit later in this month of January 2020. And I hope you find that informative and interesting.